Imagine you're born 40,000 years ago. You grow up, you meet someone, you spend years together, you have children, you grow old. Then one afternoon, a stranger appears out of nowhere. He smiles and asks, "So, how long have you two been married?" You look at him, completely confused. "Married? What's that?" He tries again. "You know, your wedding." Still nothing. He points at your partner. "So, your wife?" You both stare at each other, then back at him. Eventually, you'd probably assume this strange visitor had spent too much time standing in the sun, because marriage doesn't exist. No weddings, no rings, no marriage certificates, no anniversaries, no expensive venues, no awkward relatives asking, "So, when are you having kids?" Ironically, the kids are already running around. Because despite having absolutely no concept of marriage, people are still falling in love, still raising families, still becoming grandparents, still living perfectly normal lives. Which raises a question that's surprisingly difficult to answer. If humans managed for hundreds of thousands of years without marriage, why did we ever invent it? Because here's something most people never think about. Marriage feels ancient, almost natural, like it's always been part of being human. But it wasn't. For most of our existence, marriage simply wasn't a thing. Not because people forgot to invent it, because the world didn't need it. At least, not yet. To understand why, we have to go somewhere very few history books ever take us. Not to ancient Egypt, not to Greece, not to Rome. We have to go much further back, long before cities, long before kings, long before money, long before anyone had ever argued over a wedding guest list. Picture a small camp somewhere in East Africa. The sun is beginning to disappear beyond the horizon. Smoke curls upward from a fire. Someone returns carrying fresh meat over their shoulder. Another arrives with berries. Children are running through the camp, laughing, completely ignoring every adult who's trying to get them to sit still. An older woman bursts into laughter because one of the younger hunters has somehow managed to trip over a rock that has probably been sitting in exactly the same place for the last 10,000 years. Apart from the lack of smartphones, it feels surprisingly familiar. People joke. People argue. People flirt. People fall in love. People break up. People find someone else. Life goes on. Everything about this scene feels recognizably human, except for one tiny detail. Nobody here is married. At first, that sounds impossible, because we've grown up treating marriage as if it's the foundation of every family. No marriage must mean no families, right? Anthropologists weren't convinced. One of them was Frank Marlowe. Instead of sitting in an office imagining what prehistoric life looked like, Marlowe packed his bags, traveled to northern Tanzania, and spent years living with one of the last hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, the Hadza. If anyone could offer a glimpse into how our distant ancestors might have lived, it was them. Like every anthropologist, Marlowe knew today's hunter-gatherers aren't living fossils. They're modern people with their own unique history. But some parts of their lifestyle still resemble the conditions humans evolved in. So he watched, he listened, he asked questions, and slowly, a picture began to emerge. People formed long-term relationships. Many couples stayed together for years. Some didn't. People separated, found new partners, started new families. There wasn't one rigid rule that everyone followed. Life was messy. But here's what really caught his attention. It wasn't the couples, it was the children. Spend a day in a Hadza camp, and something unusual becomes impossible to ignore. A child isn't attached to just one adult. 1 minute they're sitting with their mother. A little later, their grandmother is carrying them. Then an older sibling steps in. Another woman hands them food. Someone else calms them when they cry. It's almost impossible to tell whose child is whose, because everyone seems to be helping. At first glance, it looks chaotic. Then you realize it's incredibly efficient. And that observation reminded another anthropologist of a question she'd been asking for years. Her name was Hrdy, and she couldn't stop thinking about babies. Not because babies are particularly good at conversation. Quite the opposite. Human babies are, to put it politely, completely useless. Seriously. A baby horse is standing within a few hours. Baby giraffes start walking almost immediately. Sea turtles hatch, look around for about 3 seconds, and head confidently toward the ocean without anyone giving them directions. Human babies? Congratulations, you have mastered crying. Everything else will take a while. In fact, human babies are among the most helpless newborns in the animal kingdom. For years, they need constant protection, constant feeding, constant attention, which creates an enormous evolutionary problem. How does one mother gather food, avoid predators, carry a child, look after older children, and somehow survive? Sarah Hrdy believed the answer wasn't one mother. It wasn't even 2 parents. It was everyone. She called humans cooperative breeders, a complicated scientific term for a surprisingly simple idea. Human children evolved expecting help from an entire community. And suddenly, something strange happens to the marriage story. If children were already being raised successfully, long before marriage existed, then marriage couldn't have been invented just to raise children. So, what problem was it actually solving? The answer begins with something no chimpanzee has ever argued about, no wolf has ever fought over, and no elephant has ever left to its children. Property. It sounds like the least romantic word imaginable. Nobody has ever looked into their partner's eyes and whispered, "You complete my inheritance." But strangely enough, property may have changed human relationships more than love ever did. Imagine you're a hunter-gatherer. Everything you own can be carried on your back. A spear, a stone knife, maybe an animal skin to sleep on. Tomorrow, you might wake up and decide to follow a herd of antelope 50 kilometers away. Nothing ties you to one place. Nothing lasts forever. So if someone asks, who owns this land? The answer is simple. Nobody. The land owns itself. Now imagine something changes. Not overnight. Slowly. Almost quietly. Instead of following food, people begin growing it. At first, it seems like a brilliant idea. Why spend all day chasing dinner when you can make dinner grow right outside your home? So people plant seeds. Wait. Water them. Wait some more. And one day, those tiny seeds become enough food to feed an entire family. It's one of the greatest inventions in human history. It's also the beginning of a brand new problem. Because the moment you spend months growing crops, you don't want someone else walking over and saying, "Thanks, I'll take this." Suddenly, ownership matters. Then houses appear, storage pits, granaries, livestock. The more humans settled down, the more they had to lose. And once you have something worth keeping, another question appears. Who gets it after you're gone? A wolf never has to answer that question. Neither does a chimpanzee. They don't leave behind farmland. They don't pass houses to their children. Nature never needed inheritance. Civilization did. Imagine 2 brothers. They've spent years helping their parents build a small farm. Their parents grow old. Then one day, they're gone. Now both brothers stand in the same field. One says, "This belongs to me." The other says, "No, it belongs to me." Who decides? Flip a coin? Arm wrestle? Hope everyone behaves? That might work for a family. It doesn't work for a village, or a city, or an empire. As societies grew larger, humans discovered something frustrating. Love is wonderful, but love is terrible at solving legal disputes. Love doesn't decide who inherits a house. Love doesn't settle arguments over farmland. Love doesn't explain which children belong to which household in the eyes of society. Humans needed something else, not because they had forgotten how to love, but because civilization had become too complicated to run on feelings alone. Anthropologist Joseph Henrich has spent much of his career studying how humans built institutions, shared systems of rules that allow millions of unrelated people to cooperate. Think about it. Money only works because everyone agrees it has value. Laws only work because people recognize them. Even countries exist because enough people believe they do. Marriage works in a surprisingly similar way. It's an agreement, a social invention, a way for an entire community to recognize a relationship, not just the 2 people inside it. But before we congratulate ourselves for inventing marriage, there's something that doesn't quite fit. Because if marriage was the obvious solution, every society should have invented it. Right? Well, they didn't. thousands of kilometers away, high in the mountains of southwest China, anthropologists found a community that had organized family life for generations, without marriage as most of us understand it. And when they looked closer, they realized something surprising. Marriage was never the only answer. The community is called the Mosuo. Nestled high in the mountains around Lugu Lake in southwest China, they've fascinated anthropologists for decades, not because they discovered some secret to happiness, but because they answered one question very differently. Imagine visiting a Mosuo village. You notice something unusual almost immediately. There are children everywhere. Grandmothers are busy cooking. Uncles are repairing fishing nets. The house is full of laughter. It looks like any ordinary family, until you ask a very ordinary question. So, where's the husband? People might look at you, slightly confused, because traditionally, there wasn't one. At least, not in the way most of us imagine. Instead of husbands and wives building one household together, the Mosuo traditionally organized families around the mother's home. Women stayed with their families. Brothers stayed with their sisters. Children grew up surrounded by grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. A woman's romantic partner might visit at night, then quietly return to his own family's home before morning. No wedding, no moving in together, no exchanging surnames, no awkward debate over whose parents to visit during the holidays. To many outsiders, it sounded impossible. But for the Mosuo, it was simply life. Anthropologists didn't study the Mosuo because they thought everyone should copy them. They studied them because they proved something important. Marriage isn't the only way humans have ever organized family life. Different societies solved the same problem in different ways. And the Mosuo weren't alone. Across history, anthropologists have documented an astonishing variety of marriage systems. Some societies practiced lifelong monogamy. Others allowed one man to have several wives. In parts of the Himalayas, some communities practiced fraternal polyandry, where several brothers shared one wife. At first, that sounds completely bizarre, until you imagine living halfway up a mountain. Your family owns one tiny farm. If every son marries separately, the land gets divided, again and again, until nobody has enough to survive. So instead, the brothers shared both the land and the marriage. Strange? Absolutely. Practical? Also, yes. Humans have always been remarkably good at inventing solutions that make perfect sense, only if you understand the problem they were trying to solve. And that's when something clicked for anthropologists. Maybe they'd been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe the question wasn't, why did humans invent marriage? Maybe it was, what problem was each society trying to solve? Once you ask that, history starts looking very different. Marriage isn't one invention. It's hundreds of different inventions, each shaped by environment, resources, family structure, beliefs, politics, and survival. A farming village doesn't have the same problems as a hunting camp. A kingdom doesn't have the same problems as a mountain community. So why would they all build the same institution? They didn't. Marriage kept changing because humans kept changing. And then it changed again because somewhere along the way, marriage stopped being just about survival. It became something else, something far more personal. Today, if you ask someone why they're getting married, very few people answer. To organize inheritance, they'll probably say, because I love them, which raises one final mystery. If love existed before marriage, why do so many people still connect the two today? To answer that, we need to leave anthropology for a moment and step inside the human brain, because the next part of this story isn't about history. It's about you. If marriage began as a way of organizing society, why do people still get married today? After all, most of us don't own kingdoms. Very few of us are arguing over who inherits a herd of goats. And unless your family happens to own a medieval castle, property probably isn't the first thing on your mind when you fall in love. So why has marriage survived? The obvious answer is love. But once again, the story isn't quite that simple. Anthropologist Helen Fisher spent decades trying to understand one of the strangest behaviors in the animal kingdom. Why do humans fall in love so intensely With one particular person, she traveled across cultures, read historical records, studied brain scans, and compared humans with dozens of other species. What she found was fascinating. Love, marriage, and sex are not the same thing. Your brain treats them as three different systems. The first is lust. It's biology's way of saying, find someone. The second is romantic attraction. That's the feeling that keeps one person stuck in your head all day. The one that somehow convinces you checking your phone every 30 seconds is perfectly reasonable behavior. Then there's the third system, attachment. The quiet feeling that makes two people want to stay together long after the fireworks settle down. According to Fisher, these systems evolved long before marriage, hundreds of thousands of years before anyone exchanged rings. Our ancestors were already falling in love, already forming pair bonds, already grieving when they lost someone they cared about. Marriage didn't invent those emotions. It inherited them. Think of it like this. Imagine humans invented cars first and roads much later. Cars already existed. Roads simply made traffic easier to organize. Marriage did something similar. Love came first. Marriage organized it. And suddenly, everything starts making sense. Hunter-gatherers didn't need formal marriage because their societies were small. Everyone knew everyone. If a child was born, the whole camp knew. If two people separated, everyone knew that too. You don't need paperwork when your entire world is 30 people sitting around the same campfire. But cities changed everything. Imagine living among 10,000 strangers. Now ask yourself, how do you know who's responsible for whom? Who inherits what? Who belongs to which family? Who can make decisions for a child? You can't solve those questions with feelings alone. You need something everyone recognizes, not because love became weaker, because society became larger. Marriage became one of those shared agreements, not the only one, but one that survived remarkably well. Which brings us back to the wolf. Remember him? He's still sitting there, completely baffled. He's wondering why humans needed rings, ceremonies, paperwork, and expensive photographers just to tell everyone they love each other. And honestly, from a wolf's perspective, it's a fair question. Because wolves don't build civilizations. They don't pass laws. They don't inherit property. They don't create nations. Humans do. And once you build civilizations, you start inventing institutions. Money, governments, schools, courts, passports, marriage. They're all invisible ideas. None of them exist in nature. They exist because millions of people agree that they exist. That's one of humanity's greatest evolutionary superpowers. Not bigger brains, not stronger muscles, shared imagination. The ability to believe in ideas that only exist because other humans believe in them too. Marriage isn't just a relationship. It's one of the oldest shared stories we've ever told ourselves. Tomorrow morning, millions of people around the world will wake up beside someone they love. Some will be married. Some won't. Some will wear rings. Some never will. But all of them are experiencing emotions that are far older than marriage itself. Long before the first wedding, long before the first priest, long before the first government, our ancestors were already choosing each other. Marriage didn't teach humans how to love. Humans taught marriage what love meant. And perhaps that's why, out of every species on Earth, only one turned love into a promise.